Hi, okay, back to Gangsta Granny. We were on chapter 12, the love bomb. So, Granny was talking about running away from the house where she'd just stolen a ring, a diamond. So, I waded across the stream and started climbing the tree. My hands were muddy and my legs and feet were wet, and I kept slipping down the trunk. I frantically rubbed my hands on my nightshirt and began to climb again. I scrambled to the very top of the tree and stayed as still as I could. I heard dogs and the army of Davenport's men follow the stream to a different part of the forest. The dogs' ferocious barks became distant, and after a while the torches were just specks in the distance. I was safe. I shivered up that tree for hours. I waited until dawn, slid down the tree, and made my way back to our cottage. I crept into bed and lay there for a few moments before the sun rose. Ben could picture everything she described perfectly in his mind. Granny had him utterly spellbound. "Did they come looking for you?" he asked. "Well, no one got a good enough look at me, so Davenport had his men search everywhere in the village. Every cottage was turned upside down to look for the ring." "Didn't you say anything?" "I wanted to. I felt so guilty, but I knew if I owned up I would be in deep trouble. Lord Davenport would have me publicly flogged in the village square." "So what did you do?" "I swallowed it." Ben couldn't believe his ears. The ring? Granny, you swallowed the ring? "I thought it was the best way to hide it, in my stomach. A few days later, it came out when I went to the toilet." "That must have been painful," said Ben, his bum wincing at the thought. Passing a big diamond ring out of his bottom didn't sound in any way enjoyable. "It was painful, excruciating, in fact," Granny grimaced. "The good thing was that our cottage had been searched already from top to bottom." "Not my bottom, the bottom of the cottage, I mean," Ben chuckled. "And Davenport's men had moved on to search in the next village. So one night I went off into the woods and hid the ring. I placed it where no one would ever look, under a rock in the stream." "Clever," said Ben. "But that ring was only the first of many, Ben. Stealing it had been the biggest thrill of my life, and as I lay in bed each night, all I dreamed about was stealing more and more diamonds." "That ring was just the beginning," continued Granny in a low whisper, staring deep into Ben's innocent young eyes, "of a lifetime of crime." Chapter 13. A lifetime of crime. Hours passed in what seemed like minutes as Granny told her grandson how she had stolen every one of the dazzling items spread out on the living room floor. The huge tiara had belonged to the wife of the President of the United States of America, the First Lady. Granny told Ben how over 50 years earlier she had sailed away to America on a cruise liner to steal it from the White House in Washington, and that while sailing back home she had robbed every rich lady on the ship of her jewels. How she was caught red-handed by the captain of the ship and escaped by diving overboard and swimming the last few miles of the Atlantic Ocean back to England with all of the jewellery hidden in her knickers. Granny told Ben that the sparkling emerald earrings that had been in her little bungalow for decades were worth over £1 million each. They had once belonged to the wife of an enormously wealthy Indian Maharaja, a Maharani. The old lady recounted how she enlisted the help of a herd of elephants to steal them. She had coaxed the elephants to stand on top of each other to form a giant ladder, so that she could scale the wall of the fort in India, where the earrings were kept in the royal bedchamber. The most amazing tale of all was of how she stole the enormous deep blue diamond and sapphire brooch that sat sparkling on her worn living room carpet. She told Ben that it had once belonged to the last empress of Russia, who ruled with her husband the Tsar before the Communist Revolution of 1917. It had for many years been under bulletproof glass at the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, guarded 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year by a platoon of fearsome Russian soldiers. This theft had required the most elaborate plan of all. Granny had hidden in an ancient suit of armour in the museum, which dated back hundreds of years to the time of Catherine the Great. Each time the soldiers looked the other way, she would edge forward in the metal suit a few millimetres until she got close enough to the brooch. It took her a week. What, like Granny footsteps? Asked Ben. Exactly, young man, she replied. Then I smashed the glass with the silver axe I was holding and grabbed the brooch. How did you escape, Granny? That's a good question. Now, how did I escape? Granny looked flummoxed. Sorry, it's my age, boy. I forget things. Ben smiled supportively. That's okay, Granny. Soon the old lady's memory seemed to come back into focus. Oh, yes, I remember, she continued. I ran outside into the courtyard of the museum, leapt into the barrel of a huge cannon, and then fired myself to safety. Ben pictured this for a moment. His granny in deepest, darkest Russia, flying through the air in an ancient suit of armour. It was hard to believe, but how else could this little old lady come to have such an astonishing collection of priceless gems? Ben loved Granny's daring tales. At home, Ben had never had stories read or told to him. His parents always just switched on the television and slumped down on the sofa when they got home from work. Hearing the old lady talk was so exciting. Ben wished he could move in with her. He could listen to Granny all day. There can't be a jewel in the world you haven't stolen, said Ben. Oh, yes, there is, young man. Hang on. What's that? What's what? Said Ben. Granny was pointing behind Ben's head, an expression of horror on her face. It's, what? Said Ben, not daring to turn around and see what she was pointing at. A shiver ran down his spine. Whatever you do, said Granny, don't turn around. See you on the next one.